Okay, I'm ready to start. And by the way, I'm sorry for all the mess in the background here. I just moved flats, and it's I haven't had the time to design my perfect Zoom background yet. Okay, let me share my screen and get started. Here we go. Great. Okay, so my name is Erlend Hovgaard, as I said. I'm a business design director at Designit, and I am so incredibly excited to be here today to talk with you about something that I am very passionate about, sustainable business model innovation. Okay, quick story before we begin. Bear with me. This single bare light bulb illuminates a fire department in California. The centennial light, as it's known, has been burning continuously for 120
sorry to stop
years.
We can't see your screen.
Oh, can you not? That's weird. How about you? Can you, Maite, can you see?
No, I can see you, but not your shared screen.
Oh, that is weird. We just checked this before, didn't we?
You did.
Let me try again. Desktop 2.
There we go.
There we go. Nice.
Perfect.
Didn't get to see the nice animation of the Designit logo. Oh, here it is. Okay, so as I was saying, this light bulb looks really old. It's completely alone in a corner of a fire department in California, and it's called the centennial light. It's been burning continuously for 120 years. And to proponents of a less resource-intensive, more sustainable economy like us in this virtual room, this bulb shows that everyday products can be affordable and built to last. But not everyone has an interest in such longevity, of course. 100 years ago, a cartel of the biggest light bulb manufacturers agreed to keep lifetimes of their products to 1,000 hours or so, down from an average of 2,500 hours before that, in order to sell more of them. So many companies still make it difficult or even illegal to fix their products. And Apple has admitted to slowing down older iPhones through their software upgrades to make people buy new ones. This should be illegal, and it's not just morally corrupt, but bad business based on wasteful, zero-sum thinking. Okay, but what's the alternative? This is what this is about. So let's talk sustainable business model innovation. Here's the agenda. So first I'll talk about why we need this and how innovation needs to happen at a systemic scale. Then we'll talk about what this thing really is and how it's about designing circular and co-creative businesses for people, profit, and planet. And then we'll talk about how to do it. How it's about understanding the system, using proven strategies, and then experimenting, crucially. And then briefly at the end, we'll look at how to get started. And in the middle, we'll do a quick Q&A, and at the end as well, we'll do a quick Q&A. And as you can see, this is a jam-packed agenda, and I'll go through a couple of things quite quickly. So it's probably not one of those talks where you can sort of answer your emails on the side as well while you listen, which it normally is like these days. So if you're restless, like I often am when I'm at webinars and Zoom meetings, stand up, have a stretch while you listen. That's fine. And I really want you to participate in this webinar too. So during the entire thing, as Maite said, I really want you to share your comments. I want to hear your thoughts. Bring me questions. Maybe you have answers to questions as well. Give it a go in the chat, and we'll pick up some of the questions for me or maybe you to answer midway and at the end. I'm sure there's lots of experience and knowledge out there, so please do share. To kick that discussion off, I have a couple of questions for you. So before you've heard this talk, what do you think sustainable business model innovation is really about? I'll ask the question again at the end as well. And also, in your experience, what's the most important success factor? So we'll look at a few of your answers and questions midway. Okay, are you ready? Let's get going. Why we need it, chapter 1. Okay, let me wake you up this morning by slapping this slide in your face, because let's be real, we've been sitting where we eat. We've been sawing off the proverbial branch we're sitting on. And imagine this yellow circle is all the physical materials, food, oil, metal, everything that the economy consumes each year. It's 84 billion tons. And how much of it do you think is just wasted afterwards? And how much do you think is reused? This is how much, 9%. And all the rest is just garbage and pollution. Imagine if we did the same with employees. If we just used them up, fired 91% of our staff each year, just to spend lots of money to hire and train new ones. Imagine the cost of doing that. But that's exactly what we're doing with our resources. We're firing them every year, 9 out of 10. And this is just the waste in physical material. In a lot of industries, over 20% of customers or more are lost each year. Their churn, as it's called. And instead of improving their services or the customer relationships, they spend so much money on advertising. So instead of closing the hole, fixing the leak in the bottom of the bucket, they're pouring in new stuff at the top. All this waste means that there is a business opportunity in doing something about it as well. And that's massive. And it doesn't necessarily have to be so hard, because there's so much of this waste, it shouldn't be that hard to remove some of it. In fact, we can see that businesses that are grabbing this opportunity and are pioneers in sustainability are outperforming their peers, and they're doing so financially as well. Accenture says that the circular economy is a $4.5 trillion market opportunity. We used to look at sustainability as a compliance thing, where we just had to stay within the law. And now it's still mostly about a CSR thing, corporate social responsibility, where it's all about sort of bragging and greenwashing and communications, not really doing a lot. Now we need to approach it as both an historic responsibility, a moral obligation to the planet and future generations, and a big business opportunity. Innovation for sustainability gives competitive advantage, decreased costs, increased retention of customers and employees, improved margins, and new services that are win-win for all. But still, it gets only 4% of innovation investment. Let's do something about that. And right off the bat, my first tip to you is to use also these types of strategic, business-oriented arguments as well to get support in your organization for sustainable innovation. And I hate to say it, but designers and innovators like us, we've been a part of the problem. People like us made social media products to be addictive. And we made it so it damages young people's mental health. People like us made single-use plastic products that pollute our oceans. We are responsible for what we put into the world. And we need to get real and set some ethical standards for ourselves. Design has come a long way, especially in the last decade, and we finally got a seat at some of the big tables. So let's use that opportunity to change. And of course, human-centered innovation is also an important, if not the most important part of the solution. Design is sorely needed for sustainable innovation because of our human-centric, creative, and experimental approach. And this is exactly what we need going forward. In fact, it's already happening. Belinda Gates said a couple of years ago that human-centered design is the innovation that is changing the most lives in the developing world. So no pressure. But we need our skills applied at a greater scale. We started off crafting products and touch points. Then we advanced to design user experiences and services. Then we increased the scope to designing strategies that encompass many user experiences. This is, I think, in my opinion, where we are at now. And we've come a long way in making stuff easier to use and making organizations more user-centric. But this is not enough anymore. It's too little, too late. We need to scale up and seek change on a much bigger level. Design must take on a bigger scope and be applied to systemic issues like business models and value chains and ecosystems. Because the problems we face are massive and systemic, which means our approach must be too. And by the way, this type of systemic innovation of business models has proven to have bigger impact than innovation of products or services in isolation. It can often take more time before we see the results, but the investment doesn't necessarily have to be bigger. The history of innovation is littered with companies that had a disruptive technology within their grasp, but failed to commercialize it successfully. They did not couple it with a disruptive business model. Classic quote from Clayton Christensen, who sadly died last year. If you haven't read his books, Innovator's Dilemma and Innovator's Solution, please run to the bookshop after this. Okay, so business models are very powerful. And if we use startups as a proxy for innovation in general, the top reason for failure in innovation is a bad business model. And at the flip side, if we look at the biggest companies and growth stories of our time too, I would argue they are successful mainly because of their superior business models, not mostly because of their fantastic products. And how could they become so successful without owning some of the key assets? Like for Netflix, some years ago, they would have to have rental shops, and Airbnb doesn't even have any real estate. That's because they are platform business models, which is a type of business model that has become very common in tech, especially in the last 15 years, which we need to be careful about because it's very much winner takes it all and not necessarily sustainable if you look at the big picture. Okay, if you weren't convinced from the start that we need to design sustainable business models, I hope you are now. Before we dive into how we do that, we first need to understand what a business model really is and what can make it sustainable. Let's get into it. So a business model is how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. So there's a product or a service or a value proposition, as we call it, at the core that is created or produced, that's the green one, then delivered to customers through some channels like a shop or a website. Then there's an exchange of money for product, right? That's the value capture part. There are four main elements in a business model. Let's look at all these four parts. So value at the core of it, that's the usual thing where we start when we work with business model innovation. And we ask ourselves questions like, what product, services, or outcomes do people need? Or how can we improve user experiences or stakeholder experiences when we're designing for example, employees to increase value? But of course, we can also innovate the other parts of the business model. We don't have to start there or even work with all four elements. So we can look at how we create value, how we produce value, and ask ourselves questions like, how can we improve our processes? Can we partner up with someone to be more efficient or deliver more value? Can we make better use of our unique capabilities to become more competitive? Quick example. In Designit, we redesigned the process and patient journey for breast cancer patients at a big Nordic hospital. And by doing that, we reduced the waiting time before diagnosis, which was a traumatic part of the current journey, by 90%. By redesigning how hospital staff was organized, how they created value. Deliver. Can we target a different segment? Can we change our relationships with customers? Could we go from, for example, mostly one-on-one talks with an account manager and you as a customer to more self-service, for example? That's a change in the relationship. Or can we use different channels for distribution or marketing? And here's an example of that. We worked with Flock, which is a big European office furniture manufacturer. And they previously only sold their furniture through dealers. They didn't have any direct contact with end customers, which was small companies and big companies. And we helped them craft a new direct-to-customer business model by adding e-commerce. So this is the classic channel innovation. And then lastly, we have the capture part of the business model. So we ask ourselves questions like, can we change how or what we charge? Can we somehow create a new revenue source? Or can we decrease costs? An example here again, we work with a big Norwegian bank to reinvent the credit card and make it more sustainable and digital. So we took away the actual card, we made it into a digital service, and within the structure of that product, we nudged users to set up down payment plans immediately, rather than having it just recurring debt, as it often is with a credit card. And then we gave them a lower interest rate as well, a lower price, because with the down payment plan, the risk is lower for the bank, so we can lower the price. Classic capture innovation. So innovation of business model is basically creating a new business model or doing systemic improvements in how an organization creates, delivers, captures value. And we're not looking for sort of incremental changes or a little lower costs or a little higher revenues. We're looking for systemic change in the logic or structure of the business model. You probably recognize this Venn diagram. No presentation about innovation is complete without this. It's about what needs to be in place for innovation to happen. There's feasibility, and it answers the question, can we do this? Is it possible for us to create this? And then there's viability. Is this something we should do? Can we make money out of it? Is there profitable growth in it for us? And desirability, do they want it? Can we create demand for it? Does it fit some sort of need? And our model of a business model neatly fits into this, right? So value creation is about feasibility, value capture is about viability, and value delivery is about desirability. To put that into a framework. But we need a fourth lens of innovation, because it doesn't really matter if it's feasible for us to do it, if we can make money out of it, or if some people might want it. If the world doesn't need it, we shouldn't make it. So this is the real sweet spot of innovation. But in order to do this, in order to create business models that are sustainable, we need these three shifts. We need to go from having only linear business models and a linear economy to circular business models. We need to go from being highly combative, fiercely competitive, and sort of single-minded in how we compete against our customers and competitors and partners, going at it alone, to becoming more collaborative and co-creative, open, seeking partnerships. And from being single-mindedly focusing on profit and shareholder wealth as the only bottom line, we need to be guided by the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet. Let's take one by one. First, circular. This is a real simple illustration of the linear economy, where there's a lot of waste. And then recycling economy, where there's quite a bit of waste still. And then the circular economy, where there's only a little waste. We are today playing around with recycling a little bit, but we are still very much in a linear economy. This is the value chain of linear business. In a linear value chain, materials are taken from somewhere, usually from Earth, then they're made into something in a factory often, then we sell those products. And from a company point of view, a lot of the time, I'm done. Anything that happens after this, not my problem. That's the mentality a lot in a linear business. But of course, then the customer will use the product. And on the left side of this blue mountain, we are adding value. That's why we're climbing up this blue mountain. But on the right side, it's just waste. After it's been used, we throw it away. As we saw, 91% of our resources are waste. So we're just destroying value. In addition to that, there's a lot of negative ripple effects and hidden costs from a Ledio business. That could be, for example, emissions from the production process, or it could be potentially social costs as well that are somewhat hidden and not accounted for by the company itself. In a circular business model, on the other hand, products or materials are first reused, and then they're returned, repaired, or recycled in a circular way. So there's very little destruction of value. Value is sustained. It goes back in a loop. And also minimizes negative ripple effects and secondary costs for society and the planet, because it takes an holistic perspective on the value and the waste it produces. It doesn't only look at the direct costs and ripple effects. It looks at the bigger picture as a circular business. And in a circular economy, all businesses are circular in this utopian future world and collaborate to retain value. Your waste is my input, and my knowledge or technology is yours to use for a price, of course. In an economy like this, a circular economy, profitability and growth is decoupled, disconnected from the use of scarce resources. And this can only be achieved, of course, when businesses are open to collaborate and when their business models are not just based on competition and winning at the expense of others, people on the planet, and competitors, because no single organization can solve these big problems alone. We need to approach this with a win-win attitude. For too long, businesses have been run like armies, and we need to turn that on its head. Of course, we should not and cannot stop having a market economy altogether, where some companies are competitors. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a middle way, a best of both worlds solution. At least we can seek more collaboration with our suppliers and our customers to remove waste in the supply chain and help each other to sustain and retain value. Thankfully, we are seeing a trend where companies are increasingly attending to the breadth of their stakeholders, not only their owners, and at least talking about creating shared value for people, profit, and planet. That is some progress, because we need all these three. There is no sustainability in the long term if one of these are lacking. Peter Drucker said that profit for a company is like oxygen for a person. If you don't have it, you're out of the game. But if you think life is about breathing, you're really missing something. So we shouldn't care about profit as if it's our purpose or meaning, not at all, but it has to be there because we need to breathe, and it's a good metric as well for efficiency. But let me hear from you in the chat. Do you think Uber and Airbnb has a well-balanced triple bottom line? They are making use of some idle resources, of course, our empty houses and our unused cars in the driveway. But does that really make up the ripple effects and the costs they put on society and other businesses? Let me hear from you. Lately, there's more talk about regenerative sustainability, because not adding more harm is not enough anymore. After centuries of linear business practices and destruction of natural systems, we need to put back more than we've taken and restore natural systems. We need a net positive impact. And this is about creating thriving ecosystems in place of destroyed ones, designed to be entirely circular from the start with a more ambitious, holistic, and long-term scope. So that's sort of the next level of sustainability. Okay, so now that we know what a business model is and what how important it is that it's sustainable, we need to revise our definition of a business model. We need to add sustainability, the fifth element. So to summarize, a sustainable business model is how an organization co-creates, delivers, captures, and sustains value in a circular way, having an overall net positive impact on people, profit, and planet. Great, so we're clear on what a sustainable business model is. Now let's look at some examples and 5 proven strategies that we can take inspiration from. Number 1, this is the traditional one. This is what you think of basically. So it's about using circular supplies and how we use resources. So it's either to design durable and easy to repair products or using renewable resources in production. Quick example here, the Flock that I mentioned earlier. They are quite good compared to other office manufacturers to use recycled plastics in their production. And they also design their chairs with very few parts, so they're easier to fix and reassemble. And this year, they've been taking these plastic tubes, which we in Norway use to mark where the road is when there's a lot of snow on it. There's not so much snow now, but I think in Risør, where they produce these chairs, they still have these poles along the way to show where the road actually is. And there's a lot of plastic waste in that. So they've taken a lot of those plastic tubes and made chairs out of them, which is quite cool. And then there's strategy number 2, which is about sharing platforms and optimizing capacity use through sharing. So instead of owning something, you pay per use, you lease it, or you rent it. City bike schemes is a good example of this. We've been working a lot with Oslo Bysykkel, which is the one in Oslo. And instead of us owning our own bikes and it's standing still idle in our outside being not used a lot of the time, we can share the bikes and we can decrease the idle time and also not use the bus or our car. Product life extension is the 3rd one, and it's about extending life cycles. So repairing and upgrading and reselling products that have been used. Go Good is an example of this in Norway. They refurbish office chairs and furniture, and they sell it as a service. So people can subscribe to really good office furniture, and there's a whole service around it. So they have lots of value added service. It's really cool. Number 4, recover value in waste. So this is all about taking something that was waste, didn't have any value, and then making something out of it, using it as input in other value chains. For example, Rotterschwammen is a really cool example. So it's a fungi farm growing oyster mushrooms off discarded offie grounds in an old unused swimming pool complex. They also sell kits, so you can make mushrooms and coffee grounds yourself. And around this facility now, which was totally dead before, it's an entire community of entirely circular businesses. So you can in one way say that that's a small little circular economy already, proving the value of it. And then there's product as a service, so offering outcome-oriented solutions. And this is an alternative to the classic traditional model of buy and own. So products are used by one or many customers through a lease or pay for use arrangement, or better yet, pay for success or only when a certain outcome has happened. This business model gives incentives for product durability, shifting from volume to performance. And when it's a service, sharing or reusing a product is no longer a threat to the business, but instead driver of revenue and reduced costs. Apple's iPhone upgrade program is an example of this, where you basically rent your phone from them and get a new one each year. And you give the old one back so they can fix it if necessary and then resell it. This is a classic product as a service strategy. I'm not saying it's a good deal for most people. I'm not sure of the total sort of sustainable balance sheet here, but it's product as a service. And actually Michelin, the tire manufacturers, did the same thing a while ago, where you don't buy the tire, you pay per mile for using it. And then you give it back when it's worn out, so Michelin can recycle it. So it gives Michelin free input. At Designit, we helped a big Nordic food company with business modeling, and we developed several business model concepts, all based on going direct to customers. and offering food and supplements as a service, as a subscription to help people live healthier lives. This is also an example of this. This included a tailored dietary plan as well. This fifth strategy, as a service, is also the most powerful one. So if you remember only one of these 5 strategies, remember this one. Because when you make it into a service, you as a service provider are responsible for all the costs, which means that you have a big incentive to reduce waste and make it more efficient. But you also retain ownership of the entire customer experience, which means that you have to make that as good as possible too. So you have massive incentives to create loyalty. This is again costly, of course, but done right, you can charge for a service in a way that gives you recurring, predictable revenues, which gets risk down, and the premium you can charge is often much higher. Services compete much less on price than products. So this strategy keeps the loop really tight and is more sustainable too. And the great thing about services is that they bring lots of meaningful jobs to the economy too, in an age where we'll really need it going forward. So I've given you some examples of companies with sustainable business models. Now, please share in the chat a company in your industry or country that you believe is a good example or front runner in sustainable business. Also, if you have some relevant experience, what tips do you have in terms of getting started with this? I'm happy to take some questions now before we go into the last part of the webinar. Maybe I'll just stop sharing my screen actually, so I can see you guys.
Okay, Erlend. There are a lot of comments in the chat, but I spotted a couple of questions in there, and then a lot of comments about the Uber question you posted.
Nice.
So to start with, 2 general questions. How then can we make visible to these companies about not only the responsibility they have to put sustainable services and products, but also its impacts on society? That's one of the questions.
What was the question?
Yeah. How can we make visible to these companies not only the responsibility they have to put sustainable services and products, but also its impact on society?
Sounds like you're on the outside of that company, right? And you want to put pressure on it. Well, as one single consumer, it's hard, of course, from the outside to make it visible for them and affect them, and that's why we need systemic change, right? So from the inside, they should deal with this. But of course, we can put pressure on. We can vote for the right political parties, so we get regulations in place. Because of course, we can't just make it up to businesses. We're in a market economy, so they will do what's best for them, right? They can. I think there's a business opportunity in being more collaborative and less sort of winner takes it all. But in the end, that's how they know how to do business. So we need to encourage them and let them see the business opportunity in this as well. As I mentioned early on, it's we can't only use, oh, but our planet is burning. Of course, it is an historic responsibility, but we also need to let them see the business opportunity. Patagonia is a great example. I see David says there. They're making a hell of a lot of money. The margins in Patagonia is really high.
All right, so there's another question that says, how did you decide that the D2C model would be profitable for your client in the furniture example?
It was not really B2C. It was but it was B2 small companies. They largely sell to dealers to big companies today, but they decided to go to small companies, micro companies, like with 1 or 2 or 3 employees. But it's basically the same. Well, we figured out that we talked to a lot of people, and we figured out that there must be demand for these chairs. And we also saw it online, that there was a lot of secondhand flock chair furniture being sold to these companies. Lots of Google searches about flock chairs, meaning people wanting to buy flock chairs, but it's really hard to do that through a dealer if you're an individual or a small company. So we saw that there was demand. They just didn't have the channel or the means to buy. So that's what we produced. And also we saw that the cost the break-even cost as well of doing this was so low that we didn't really need a lot of demand for this to be profitable at the beginning.
Right then. Okay, about the Uber question. I'll read some of the statements that were put in, but not all of them. The one says that it's not great for drivers, overall well, but not great for drivers. Another, they don't regenerate any capitals. Another comment, Airbnb seems better than Uber. It is more of a circular economy, and also Uber treats drivers poorly again. Maybe they could be on their way to become sustainable. That's a question. Yeah. Airbnb and Uber, no, they fail on the secondary effects, people and society mostly. Impact and non-human actors that they did not consider because of the narrative that business need to be disruptive.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's very Silicon Valley to talk about disruptive innovation. I don't think innovation needs to be disruptive all the time. Why? Like the classic disruptive innovation is starting at the low end of a market. You take a target group that nobody else wants, and then you build from there. But it doesn't necessarily have to be so destructive. So don't focus on being destructive or disruptive. Just try to make something people really need and want, and serve a target group that nobody else serves. That's the best thing. It's better for business as well, so you don't have to compete or destroy something else to succeed.
And then one more that says, I don't think they're completely sustainable since there are effects on people working in the industries and other long-term effects that can harm society as a whole, lack of places to live, etc. A lot around social sustainability that is problematic.
Yeah.
They're mostly around these issues.
I agree, yeah. And of course, this presentation will focus mostly on planet, and I think we could do a separate one on just social innovation. That would be really interesting, because it is super important to look at the social ripple effects of new solutions as well.
Then there seems to be quite a debate on the chat right now about circularity and sustainability. Okay. I can't keep up, honestly. But
nice.
Some of the main actors here in the chat, if somebody wants to tell Erlend what's going on, I think Daniel is pretty active in this conversation. Do you want to take a go? Anyone? No.
I can put on my camera and reveal myself. I hope you hear me.
Yeah, you can hear you. It's cut.
Yeah. Hi, Erlend. Thank you so nicely for the first part of this presentation. I really enjoy it. But I'm also working with circularity, and I'm working at IKEA for everyone here who knows about that company. And of course, I get faced with all these challenges, I think. But we had this conversation in the chat, I think, and let me hear your point as well, Erlend. But a circular business model doesn't have to be sustainable. And that's my argue here a bit to Uber conversation we had, that, for example, they might not be sustainable because, as a lot of people pointing out, the social part of it is not really fulfilling the values that we sit with. But I do think that they can become sustainable if, of course, that is a value that we want to push on them, like through legislations and other things. But what's your point there, Erlend? How would you difference or combine them? Because I know circularity is, of course, loaded with this is the way of businesses to transform into be sustainable. So I understand the connection to circular and sustainable businesses.
Yeah, I think we need circularity as well, but it's not the entire answer. It's not we need, as I said, we need to be circular because there's a lot of waste in linear business, but we also need to let the triple bottom line guide us. And we also need to be co-creative and collaborative and not just go at it alone. And there's probably more shifts as well needed that I haven't highlighted here, right? So circularity is just one part of what we need to do. It's not the entire answer. And circular businesses aren't necessarily regenerative as well, right? If we need to restore these systems that we've destroyed, circularity won't necessarily in itself fix that if we just take an existing business and make it more circular. So we design it from scratch to be regenerative as well.
Okay, and then that's settled. And for your question about companies, aside from Patagonia, which you already saw, people mentioned Scania and Houdini.
Oh, nice.
Houdini is a Swedish outdoor brand, is a great example of a sustainable business. And we had 2 Scania mentions. So I think we can, if you want to comment on these, otherwise we can move on with the rest of the presentation.
I haven't heard of their sustainability efforts, so but that's cool. I'm going to check them out. Thank you.
Sorry, just one suggestion here maybe could be check the integrated reporting thing, because this, like, we can give like examples of companies, this example, but they are just dots. It's not a framework, it's not something to follow. Like integrated reporting is a new method to measure companies, not just the financial, because you're right when you said that like if you measure, I like the oxygen, if you could like give the quote about the money being the oxygen of the company, like breathing is not the objective of life. So like integrated reporting is a framework that is like an international open standard that is already going on and is already have companies behind it to measure not only one capital, which is money, but other 5. So like it's a framework, it's not just example. So just to put it out there. Sorry for
thank you.
Like this.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if I should put that into my presentation as well. I've had a look at multi-capital scorecard, which is one as well. That's a cool one. Check it out. But it shouldn't be. Also, one point that we need reporting. Can you see my screen now, by the way? Yeah, cool.
Yes, we can.
Still.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we need reporting, but it's it's a little bit something companies do to just be compliant, right? They're like, here's proof that I'm doing something, and there's like small incremental changes, and like I'm good. They're not really. We need to report and we need to measure on the big picture, but please make new stuff as well. Like try to come up with new services, new business models. See it as a business opportunity, not just like a thing we need to report on. Okay, let's dive into how to do it. And I'll do that with these 6 rules of thumb. It's not showing that I'm sharing my screen, but you are seeing my screen. Okay, cool.
We're seeing
we see your screen.
Brilliant. So I have these 6 rules of thumb that sort of defines the approach to sustainable innovation, and I'll go through each one of them before we jump into the actual process that I'll suggest. So the first one is design services for outcomes, because people are not really interested in you or your product or service. They are interested in getting a result, having a problem solved. So as a company, until that need is there no more, you haven't done your job. Therefore, build business models around outcomes for people, profit, and planet, and not just ownership of products as it usually has been. And service business models are better at doing this and ensuring loyalty and good experience over time, because the incentives, as we talked about, are in place. And they're generally more sustainable because value is retained. So build your organization around this, and also charge for outcomes, access, or use of the service if you can't charge for actual outcomes. From a customer point of view, actually, every product is also a service. They have an experience over time with it, before, during, and after. They use it again and again, and value comes from its fit with a need and a situation. So in fact, value is co-created with the customer in the context of use, not before. And I explained a business model as in creating and then delivering, right? But that's a very static, linear type of way of thinking, and it doesn't really fit with designing service business models. But I haven't found a new model of how to design service business models that are great. But let's start thinking in terms of services and outcomes. If you're a service designer, I know there's some service designers here today, you inherently all know this. And service business models are generally harder to copy as well. So they can be more profitable and there's less competition. And a great side effect, as I mentioned earlier, is that they provide meaningful employment. And I also want you to rethink your job, your role in terms of this. Because a lot of our titles are based on the default thing we're supposed to make, like a product designer. I'm a product designer, so I design products. But this is turned out upside down. You should not feel like you've done a good job just because you've made the thing indicated in your title. Your job is when the need you're trying to meet is there no more. Things are not good, outcomes are good. And by the way, when you choose an outcome or problem that you will design for, make sure that it's aligned with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. That's a good sanity check. Rule of thumb number 2 in our approach is deep dive into systems. So the problems we need to solve are increasingly systemic and complex. So our approach needs to be the same. So do your in-depth research, investigate the theme from a number of angles, and use this data to map the system, the actors, the relationships, the causal loops, and the processes in questions. Look for value flows and intervention points. As an example, here's a nice synthesis map from some research done on the problem of hyperconnectivity in the digital age. And as you can see, there's a lot of lines between things and loops to indicate the reinforcing effects. So when you deep dive into systems, pay more attention to the flows, interactions, and relationships between the people and the organizations and the technologies than the entities themselves. Look at how they affect each other, what is cause and effect. Look for loops. So when A happens, B happens, which makes A happen even more, and so on. And look for flows of value through the system. It could be resource value like materials or products or waste streams. It could be customer value like outcomes and benefits or pains and gains for customers. There's also relationship value for partners, for example, like loyalty. And then there's, of course, money and data that also flows around a system. So make sure you get this big picture so you can zoom out before you zoom in on one part. Because of course you will need to zoom in and choose a more narrow focus when you come up with solutions. For example, we might focus on this part of the map. Perhaps we want to go in and break this red reinforcing feedback loop of binge watching. So when you do focus, you can still zoom out to the big picture, which is really important to do once in a while to make sure that you're not affecting the system in a bad way. There's an example of a nice value chain map of journalism, how journalism is made and how value flows between actors. But let's not only try to understand systems, let's redesign them. And when you do, the best source of inspiration is the oldest one, life itself. Biomimicry, as this is called, has been around for a long time in product design and engineering. And let's try to do the same when we design business models. Take inspiration from living systems, which are already sustainable by design. Number 3, co-create with stakeholders. A business model can only be sustainable if it's open and collaborative, as we've talked about. So our approach also has to be the same. We need to match our approach with the problem we're trying to solve. So to understand and redesign the system, it's also necessary to do this because we need to hear their perspectives and know their knowledge, as well as not only stakeholders but experts as well. We're used to talking mostly to users, but we need to involve more of stakeholders and including experts so we can get up and running with lots of knowledge quickly. And we do this to find the root causes, and we need them to find the solutions that will work in practice and not just works in our little world. So involve stakeholders early and bring them along for all the major activities. And it also provides ownership and engagement on their part, right? So we actually need that too for implementation. If they're not a part of the process, they won't support the implementation. Here's a quote from Gandhi, classical one: "What you do for me, but without me, you do against me." So they won't be on your side necessarily if you try to sort of design for them from the top and down to them. Especially if you're designing for less privileged people than yourself, you need to involve them. Obsess over waste and value. I've talked a lot about this already, but it's very easy to get caught up and make products and services that are too complex and have lots of waste in them and lots of unnecessary features, for example. And waste is any resource, tangible or not, that doesn't have significant value. So find the wastes and the idle resources and remove and make use of them. And stay laser focused on what brings value and what doesn't. As a quick example, we worked with Rema Insurance, which was a corporate startup, and we developed their business model, and it was all about preventing damages, because we saw that there was massive waste in the industry, because 65% of costs in the industry are damages that they have to pay out for. So we thought, okay, what if we help them prevent damages? What if we, for example, help them drive in a safer way so that they crash less often? That's a win-win-win for everybody, because the customer doesn't want to crash. We don't have to pay the damage, and of course it's good for the planet as well. This didn't work though; it was too ambitious, and I'm getting back to that because we didn't experiment enough. We started off in a too high scale. And then number 5, apply proven strategies. So instead of starting from scratch entirely, take inspiration, copy and adopt from proven strategies and patterns of sustainable business models. I made a deck with 45 patterns of sustainable business models that I'll share with you as well. It's on my website. I'll give you the link afterwards. So use these patterns to ideate. Then prototype lots of alternative business models before you test a few on stakeholders. And as I said, pay particular attention to the as a service patterns, because they're probably, in my opinion, the most powerful ones. And then test and measure what matters. This is the last rule of thumb. We're nearing the end of this webinar, so hang in there. Innovation is a sport of risk. So we need to make sure that it's our task as designers and innovators to reduce that risk. We can't just say, oh, but just believe in it, it will be good at some point. No, we need to get some knowledge that we are on the right track before we invest more money. So to prevent this risk from building up, we are testing and experimenting as early as possible. So without this data, we are in the dark and we can do more harm than good. So identify the risky assumptions, the things that have to be true for this to be a success, and then test out the ones you feel queasy about. Are we unsure about this? Is this assumption true or not? Okay, if it's an important assumption and we're not sure if it's true, probably we should test it, and include both qualitative and quantitative tests. And in the beginning, it's often more qualitative, and over time, it often becomes more quantitative. And let me dwell a little bit more on testing and measurements, because this is really important. I think we have a little time. Instincts, even if based on experience, are regularly wrong. Decisions need to be made on data, not hunches from hippos. Hippos are the highest paid person's opinion, and it's so common that in a meeting or a workshop, like some honcho just, we're going to do this, we can't do that, that's a terrible idea. No, we need to, steering committees is a really bad thing for innovation. We need data. They need to make decisions for us. And to make these decisions, we need goals, of course, what we want to achieve. We need values, what we stand for, what we believe in, and we need the data. And I see that it's quite common for designers, including myself, to sometimes over-prioritize divergence, opening up, creating choices, and then making vital decisions with like a voting exercise in a workshop. That's not sufficient data. You need data to inform your decisions, or at least a theoretical prototype or some methodical way of thinking, like a thought experiment, for example, to make decisions. We can apply the scientific method to design when we do experiments and testing. So the first thing you do is find the opportunity. So look for gaps. Like we wanted to achieve this, but we did achieve this. Here's something you want to achieve, but we're not there yet. That's a gap between some expected situation and what you want to be. And then you pick a goal and a KPI, a metric. Then you do some sort of baseline measurement, or and if you can't, not always, you can do a baseline measurement, which is a measurement to see where you are today. What is the number you're trying to improve today? If you can, do a baseline measurement. If not, set a target. Just do an educated guess. This is probably where we should be, I mean. Then you form an hypothesis. So with some data, hopefully you've done some qualitative or quantitative data at this point, try to find commonalities. A lot of the people we talk to mention this problem, or in the data, we can find correlations between these two parameters. Maybe the problem is here, or the opportunity is there. Of course, if you don't have data, you can make educated guesses, but only do that if you have to, and if you have a lot of knowledge generally about the field, so your gut feel is okay. And then you ideate the improvements based on that data. So you come up with solutions like new features or new products, or a change in what's there today, a change in the business model. And then you create an experiment, and that's a creative exercise actually, because it's people often want, oh, give an example of an experiment. Yeah, I can, but there's really depends on the thing you're trying to test or find out. There's so many different types of experiments. You can Google around and find tons of different experiments you can do for different types of problems. So what you do is design a test, or you make some sort of change in production, right? You can if it's a website, you can do some sort of change and then measure before and after, or do an A/B test, or you can design some sort of separate test on the side. And then you measure and you gather the data. Once you have the data, you need to spend time analyzing, deciding as well. So did we reach our target? Why did we, or why did we not? What's the conclusion here? This is mostly quantitative measurements, right? So often you won't know why, but you can have an hypothesis, and then you could go do other types of research to confirm your hypothesis. And then of course you repeat and go back. And what I see a lot of people forget in the beginning of innovation projects, at least in early phases, is to forget to validate the market. So a lot of designers do qualitative research, so they find out that there's a need of something, right? They talk to 10 people and they say they have a need, and that's a great way to start. But you don't know if there's an addressable market that is big enough as well. And that's something you need to do at some point. So you need to find out if many enough people have this problem, and if the problem is significant enough, is it urgent enough for them to actually be willing to reach into their pocket and buy in a real purchase situation. And a lot of times people will say that, oh yeah, I have that need. Oh, that sounds like a cool concept, but then they won't actually buy because it's not, the need is easier to ignore, or the alternatives are okay too. There's lots of methods for validating the market. For example, a validation survey could be done. It's quite simple. After you've done qualitative research, you do surveys to find out how prevalent, how many people in the population actually have those needs or are fitting with your findings. So, for example, for a bank in Norway, we found that 15% of the market has the need, or is in the group that we wanted to target. So we say, okay, that's a sizable amount. That's enough for us. And of course, we can do smoke tests. That's a common lean startup way of testing, really useful. And you can do that just to test different alternatives. For example, you can do an A/B test and you can see, oh, this value proposition has more interest than this value proposition. That's cool. And if nobody clicks on anything, of course, you need to go back and rethink. And you can also test specific price points as well with A/B tests and smoke tests, where you can put different price points on an A version and a B version of the landing page, and you can see, okay, only a little bit fewer are interested when the price is double. Whoa, then that makes sense to have the price that high. Okay, that was testing. I wanted to dwell a little bit on that because it's something people often neglect. This is the process that I imagine when I go into these types of projects. It doesn't always look exactly like this, and it's quite similar, of course, to regular innovation or design processes. But there are a few things that I want to highlight that are important to add here, and I've already mentioned them. So this is a little bit of repetition. So in the insight phase, you need to discover unmet needs of people, profit, and planet. Then you map the system and the flows in the value chain. And then based on that, you define clear outcomes and problems to be solved. And based on that, you decide, okay, this is the outcome we seek. This is the problem. So you do iterations here. First, you do some qualitative research, probably, and then you should validate. If this is a risky thing you're doing, you should probably validate those insights before you move on as well, quantitatively. That's the discover and define. And then you go into the solution part. So you take inspiration from proven strategies and living systems. You co-create with stakeholders solutions or business models or business model changes. And then you test prototypes of these changes or concepts on stakeholders and try to test them on different types of stakeholders as well, not only users. So that's the iteration of ideation and testing in the solution phase. And then in the business model phase, prototype the full business model as a system. So you propose maybe a small change or a concept, and then you sort of design the entire business model around it. You use the business model canvas. I'll show you a template that is better than the business model canvas for this type of projects. And then you define the risk hypothesis and you set up experiments and you set up the go-to-market strategy and you scale up as risks go down. So only when you have proof that you are on the right track, you can scale, and scale incrementally. Okay, I want to share with you a couple of tools as well, because it's much easier to get going if you have something to get going, something to bring into a meeting. So I want to share with you the value map, which is something that I've adapted or copied from a dude named Hovgaard. And in this map, each stakeholder has its own slice. So once you've done the research, you can plot in your findings in terms of the value missed or the value destroyed, wasted in the current business model. You can plot in your current value proposition, and then you ideate using this as a template. You put your ideas in here. Just make sure you've covered all the stakeholders and looked at what is and what should be. There's the ideation cards that I collected. There's lots of how might we questions that you can use to come up with sustainable business models, sustainable business changes, basically. And you should only use this when you have done the research. Don't start only with this, but it's good for ideation to bring into the workshop. And then I made a version of the business model canvas. There's so many versions, and of course I had to make my own because everybody has to make their own version. There's canvas mania, it's driving me crazy, but I'm participating as well. And it has sort of sustainability embedded into it, and it's not as it's more circular, it's more triple bottom line focused. So I'll share that with you as well. And then there's the patterns that I mentioned. I put them all on my website. So if you want to go to my website and pick this up, you can go to hovgaard.no/sustainable. Here's the link. So I put these tools in there and also links to some other tools that I find useful from other sources too. And the link to the PDF of this presentation will also be here at the top. Okay, we're nearing the end. Quickly, I'll give you a few tips on how to get started. So I think, in my experience, it's better to start small, guerrilla style. Don't try to talk to the big bosses and get a big project going from the start. Start a little bit guerrilla style with a couple, like one or two colleagues. So find a waste stream or an idle resource or another source of unsustainability in your value network, or maybe you have an idea of some new service that is more sustainable. And then talk to people at the low end of your market, often at the low end, to find a poorly met need or job to be done. Then you sell the business opportunity of approaching this sustainable venture. But don't only use, this is a massive responsibility, we have to do it because the planet is burning. do that, but also sell the business opportunity using numbers and stories, because that's, people in power are usually swayed by numbers and stories. And then lean in like an entrepreneur. This, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a long time. You probably think that in a year or two we'll see lots of changes, but it usually takes more time. But with passion and stamina and hard work, it will pay off, but perhaps a little later than you think. And remember, I heard the other day, I laughed at it, 9 women can't make a baby in a month. So play the long game. And then when you have some proof, some success story, it doesn't have to be big, just a small quick win, then you can get more money and talk to people in an organization and go big. And please, as you apply these principles and start doing business model innovation or whatever you're doing today, please don't move fast and break things. This is Facebook's motto, and it's a great example of this Silicon Valley type of destructive thinking we talked about a little bit earlier as well. I think it's a part of our problem. Rather, move steady like this hero of a light bulb and fix things, invent things, build things, don't break them. It's a bad mindset. Lastly, before we move on to Q&As and discussions, I want to tell you about a course. It's called Business Design for Sustainable Growth and Innovation. It's 6 weeks long and starting in the middle of April. So do check that out on servicedesign.college. Okay, 2 questions and answers. Let's do it. If you want to, you can also use this to trigger some comments in the chat too. So before you started this, before you heard this talk, you probably had an idea about what you thought sustainable business innovation was really about. Did you learn something? Is it about something else, or was this all known to you? What was your main takeaways or aha moments? So please share. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen. So Maite, are you there?
I am here.
Has it been lots of buzzing in the chats? It seems like it has.
Yes.
Nice.
But I can spot. Let me see if I find any questions. Let's see. Thanks a lot, Erlend. How do you see the importance of a mixed landscape of big corps and small startups to generate sustainable business? Is collaboration more a startup's feature, or can it happen at the scale of big corps?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think big companies should collaborate with startups, of course, but I think collaboration is even more important an opportunity in big businesses, because their value chains are much more complex. Like, they have so many suppliers and so many different types of customers, and they're participating in a big ecosystem. So I think it's much more important to go into collaborations with their suppliers and customers, and even competitors in some cases, and very often it could be win-win, right? Because okay, this opportunity is so new, we can share it. It's fine. We don't have to compete for this opportunity. So if you're trying to target a big market that is already mature, of course you'll be very competitive. But please don't. Focus on try to meet unmet needs, to find new markets. Right.
Then we have a few comments. My aha moment was that I'm happy that systems conversation is getting traction, is a must for sustainability challenges. Let me see, I'm going through this. And to focus on outcomes and not the thing you are designing, but the outcome, the jobs to be done.
Yeah, the jobs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it for now. I'm still a bit on the whole circularity and sustainability going on.
Where can I find those sustainable cards for ideation? Gabriela is asking. Oh, you have a workshop on Friday. That's cool. Well, you can find them on my website. It's hovgaard.no, so my name, my last name, HOVGAARD.NO/sustainable.
Is there a pathway for a business to be successful without having to sell something to earn money? Are there any examples of business models?
Yeah, definitely. And if you download the patterns, you can see there's a whole chapter about business models that are not necessarily based on selling stuff and getting more money for it. But of course, that won't be in the market economy that we have it. That won't be necessarily as big as you know the big businesses that sell stuff for money, because it's based on philanthropy, of course, and government support and that kind of stuff. And we need more of that too, definitely, especially to invest in the big long-term projects that are really needed for big change. There needs to be a lot of collaboration in terms of financing sustainable innovation.
Okay, I saw one. Oh my God, where'd it go? Yes, thank you. Erlend, you talk about regeneration. How do you think that conversation can be part of the business models? Can it be measured? And how do you convince leaders?
Oh, hard question, big question. Yeah, I don't know. Like this is quite new to me too, right? I think it has to be a part of the conversation, definitely. But it's when you're in a big company, it's very hard to do something that is like from scratch. Let's do something entirely circular that is regenerative from scratch. Then you need a lot of money and you need to have independence on the side of the organization to do something like that very often. So it starts off quite incremental with big companies, and in the beginning it won't be regenerative, but it's a good part of, I can't say that word, regenerative, fuck it. You know what I mean? Hard word in English, I don't know what. Yeah, it's a great part of the ambition. It's where we should be and need to be in a while. And we need businesses that start up and do this from the start. And hopefully they can grow and replace the old behemoths that we have in place right now.
Just to follow up that question, I was wondering if you think like that this like regeneration mindset should be started from like big corporations, or do you think like perhaps startups and new ventures are more I don't know, open to that conversation, or is it difficult for them? I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I think it's I think startups are more inclined to work like this and think like this, and also it's easier for them because there's no status quo that they have to change, and changing to be regenerative. Fuck, I can't say that word. It's super hard. But if big corporations could support those new startups, that would be great. If they can help finance them and get things going. Maybe they can own them and then have an ambition that, okay, hopefully in 10 years, this little company will replace our big company. That would be cool. Thanks. Good question, Carmen.
Okay, we have one here at the end. What could a sustainable business mean for a 2-3 people company who do work to creatively fulfill themselves? For example, a group of ceramic artists, if there's an alternative to selling a small number of pieces for a lot of money. So how can sustainable business mean for a small company?
Right. For themselves. That's interesting, because yeah, that's a lot of these small companies, a lot of them do it for themselves rather than for other people, right? Because I love ceramics. I'm going to do it for myself because I love it, and it's almost like an art project, and that's super admirable. And they should continue doing that if they want to. But I think you need a little bit more outside-in focus rather than this inside-out focus to do this. You need to think of it as a business opportunity. You can be sustainable still, right? But an idea could be to charge higher prices. That's cool. If you can, that's nice. Maybe there's a subscription model in there somewhere where like if you get, I don't know, small businesses to buy your ceramics on a subscription model. I don't know. Use the pattern cards if you want, and you can add ideation cards. See if you can find an opportunity there. But you need to be willing to not just do the things that you love today. If what you love is ceramics, you need to also jump into new ways of working. But lovely that you're here as well. I love that.
We have a nice takeaway here. It says, also consider design for the underdeveloped parts of our society. Service design is not only for the societies that are well off already.
Oh, definitely, it's more important there.
So I'm going through the comments, trying to spot questions.
Yeah.
Let's see this one. Many service systems depend on product take-back systems. I imagine it is a challenge to implement these because people might need to actively bring a product back, which might be a barrier. Do you have, I suppose, do you have some successful examples?
Many service designs. Let me see here. I have to sort of reread the question because I tried to read it while you were talking. Yeah.
You want to read? Okay, go ahead.
I can't think of a specific example, but I bet there are many. I keep mentioning them. The pattern cards. There are examples for each patterns as well. So maybe there's something there. If not, Google around, because it's it is definitely a challenge to do that kind of take back system. It's super costly, right? Because you need new people and you need new facilities. You need the willingness to invest in something like that because it won't necessarily be profitable in the beginning. You need to actually take it in and then use those products or waste materials and reform them into new products or fix them and bring them out and try to actually sell them again. And then you probably need to find a new target group to do that. So it's basically a new business that you have to build on the side almost to do that. But it's also a big opportunity to do that. You can quite cheaply and when you look at the big picture, build a new business, I think.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Do we? Oh. I had it spotted here. Not much. Just hold on. It just went away.
Oh, sorry,
about startups.
Sorry.
I lost it.
I love there's so many questions, and you're welcome to find me on LinkedIn and add me and ask me more questions on LinkedIn too. And if you can't find the presentation on my website or wherever, just contact me on LinkedIn if you want. Yeah, please do. Yeah, you read that one. Thank you very much for the presentation. Do you think that adding more practices from the speculative or critical design sphere could help trying to see the bigger picture and the possible consequences of projects starting from the beginning of a project? If yes, how? And that's it. Yeah. Yes, I do think. But how? Well, I'm not sure. That's speculative design is really about looking far into the future and speculating about what might be, right? Finding the big ideas. I think that's really important. I think we really need that too. Like I'm just a little bit more pragmatic and like I'm a business designer, but my background is in business, even though I'm a designer too. So it's like I get very like it's easy for me to become quite pragmatic and incremental. But I think we really need the big thoughts and the speculative ideas as well, and they can sometimes inspire smaller changes as well. All right, then I think that's all the time that we have left. I have put in the link for the course in the chat. If you guys want to check it out, we can send you the syllabus for it. It's going to be an interesting course. Erlend, thank you so much for your interesting presentation with the comment. Honestly, I couldn't keep up with the many things that were going on in there. So, but the very interesting conversation. I hope they continue it on the campus, on the Service Design College campus, and we will forward you anything interesting that comes out of it if need be.
So thank you again. Have a wonderful day. Best of success.
Thank you, Maite. This was amazing.
Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll
Have a
see
good
you
day.
next time.
Move
Bye-bye,
steady
everyone.
and fix things.